his venerable age, he is still active and takes part in his community's events. And I hope that his volunteering will be a model for generations to come. Thank you.
The honourable member from Chilliwack Hope.
After 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the corruption or the cover-up. These Liberals fought tooth and nail to prevent Canadians from getting the documents that told the truth about their massive security breach at Canada's top-level laboratory, and we now know why they were so eager to cover them up. The documents reveal that this Liberal government allowed 2 scientists who were a very serious and credible danger and a realistic and credible threat to Canada's economic security to compromise the Winnipeg lab. CSIS reported that one of the scientists intentionally transferred scientific knowledge and materials to China to benefit the PRC. The Prime Minister has said he admires China's basic dictatorship, so it's no surprise that under his watch, the regime in Beijing was allowed to infiltrate what was supposed to be one of Canada's most secure facilities. Only a common-sense Conservative government will stand on guard for our country and make sure this never happens again.
The honourable member from Markham, Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, as a member of Parliament for Markham Unionville, I rise today with great pride on this final day of Black History Month. Throughout this month, I have had the immense pleasure of attending numerous events both here in Ottawa and in my community of Markham. As we reflect on the struggles and triumphs of Black Canadians, we are reminded of their immense contribution to every aspect of our society, from arts and culture to business and politics. Black Canadians have shaped our nation in profound ways. To all my constituents in Markham Unionville and to the organizations like YRAC and MACA, thank you for your work in the month of February, and my heartfelt wishes for a very happy conclusion to Black History Month. I hope this month has been a time of learning, celebration, and above all, a reminder of our shared commitment to diversity and inclusion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And happy Black History Month. Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, not only did the government neglect national security, not only did they cover up things, they continue to skirt responsibility. Yesterday, the Minister of Health said, no high officials involved in the microbiology lab will be held responsible. If there's no one responsible, who within the cabinet will know who is responsible? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At the beginning, it's important to say that health agencies are independent, particularly in terms of national security. And it's our government that created a process to make sure that all the information is available. And it's really important for 2 Canadian citizens who were very well known as scientists did bad things like this, and there is an investigation underway with the RCMP, and this is very important, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada-China Committee in 2019 could have done exactly the same job as the ad hoc committee did, and we could have had the documents 3 years ago. The CSIS assessments released yesterday make it clear the PRC is and was actively recruiting top Canadian scientists to plunder Canada's research and intellectual property. The assessments also make clear that the PRC wants to weaponize this civilian research for military purposes against us and our allies. Knowing what we know now, will the government halt all collaboration between the Winnipeg National Microbiology Laboratory and any entities and individuals in the People's Republic of China?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that an attack on our national security by foreign nations, be it China or Russia, represents an attack on democracy and represents a direct attack on every member of this House. And that I share his outrage that China or any country would attempt to interfere in our process. The Public Health Agency, which is one of the most respected agencies in the world, hired 2 Canadian citizens who are eminent eminent and well-known scientists in Canada who lied. It is the Public Health Agency that discovered that. It is the Public Health Agency that fired them, and that's why there's now an RCMP investigation about their actions.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
The documents, Mr. Speaker, reveal a shocking disregard for Canada's national security. They reveal a government that is completely asleep at the switch on national security and the machinery of government. They reveal government employees collaborating with Beijing's government and with the biological weapons unit of the People's Liberation Army. Equally shocking are the health minister's comments. He said yesterday there was no evidence of actual breaches at the lab and no sensitive information actually left the country. The documents say otherwise. Does the minister stand by those comments?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the two Canadian scientists in question were well known for their work in virology and had spent their time working on health treatments for those that were suffering from viruses. They are collaboration. There is absolutely no evidence of the thing that the member opposite is suggesting, and I do not think that it is at all appropriate to suggest that they were involved with weaponization or things of this nature. They have all the documents, they can see all the information. We have waived all the normal considerations, not only of national security, Mr. Speaker, but of employee relationships that normally are kept confidential. It was our government that did that. That's why they have this information.
The honourable member from Cumberland, Colchester.
Speaker, scientists working with Ebola at Canada's only Level 4 lab collaborated with the People's Republic of China Army Major General. Sadly, this story does not end there. Dr. Chu was able to gain access to the lab for students from China, and it gets worse. A scientist from the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, the research arm of the PLA, known to work on biology-enabled warfare. How did so many citizens from a hostile superpower gain access to Canada's top lab? Is it because the Prime Minister admires China's basic dictatorship?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Some will attempt in national security concerns to play partisan games. I think that's unfortunate. And let me just give an example. With respect to Ebola, the exchange of Ebola in 2019 was done in the context of trying to work with China and other countries on finding solutions to Ebola, which exists in so many different parts of the country. At that moment in time in 2019, the relationship with China was in a different place. The information that was shared was through legitimate channels. It has nothing to do with this issue. It was absolutely known and handled with complete control. I think it's very, very important to not mischaracterize national security for partisan interest.
I'd like to remind all members to ensure that they don't use language which would be unparliamentary directed at any of their colleagues. The honourable member from Cumberland, Colchester.
Speaker, that minister's comments are reckless and untrue. Before March 31st, 2019, the PRC did not have a containment level 4 lab. How can I be so specific about the date? This is the date on which a scientist at Canada's top lab, the National Microbiology Lab, shipped dangerous pathogens, including Ebola virus, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This scientist had a history of visiting and collaborating with the PLA since 2016. When did the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister know about the espionage and blatant violation of our sovereignty, and when did they decide to cover it up?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
The exact opposite of a cover-up occurred. It's actually this government that created the process that released these documents. So they actually refused to participate in this process. The second thing that I will say, Mr. Speaker, with respect to our national security interests, that it is essential when we're dealing with national security to recognize two things. That the party opposite is saying that they would support a partisan interference in the Public Health Agency of Canada, that if they were in government, they would see it as acceptable for political interference into that process. No, it's at an arm's length, and rightfully it is at an arm's length. They are the ones that identified these Canadian citizens, these eminent scientists, were lying, and they took action.
There you go. Order. Colleagues. The Honourable Member
for Saint Jean. The Court of Appeal has just handed down its ruling on the state secularism law, Bill 21, which has a broad consensus in Quebec. Quebecers want a clear separation of religion and state, and that's what this law guarantees. Now that the appeals court has handed down its ruling, it's clear that the next step is the Supreme Court. We saw it with Bill 101, and we'll see it again with Bill 21. What we're asking Ottawa is simple. Can you, please, stay out of it, either directly or indirectly? Because Quebec knows what's good for Quebec. Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Justice. I appreciate the question, and obviously the court has just rendered its decision. I will read it, and we will reflect on it. But I'd like to say the message again that we've always given. We will always be here to defend the Charter of Human Rights, and if this ruling does get to the Supreme Court, we'll be there to intervene. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. I repeat, Quebec knows what is good for Quebec. We know that French is not only our official language, but also our common language, and that it must be protected. We know that equality between men and women is non-negotiable. In Quebec, just like we know the best way to protect religion is to have, versus a state to have none. And that's what Bill 21 is about. And that, too, is a broad consensus in Quebec. So will the Liberals, who say they don't like bickering, commit to not going against the will of Quebecers on Bill 21? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, our government has always underscored that we'll always be here to defend the Canadian Charter. This includes freedom of expression and freedom of religion and equality. Nevertheless, if this ruling does make it to the Supreme Court of Canada, we'll be there to intervene.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The Arrive Canada drama never stops. Remember we told the Liberals that they could ask public service to do the work that was required? They said, no, it's not possible. Well, it turns out that the Arrive Can contract was awarded to a D&D employee. A public servant actually did the work. Under the Liberals, public money going to private consultants tripled. Why are the Liberals trying to give the Conservatives a run for their money at how much money they can waste on private consulting?
Here, here. The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
I actually want to thank the member for the question because I think it's an important one. Mr. Speaker, as soon as we were made aware that the CEO of Dalian was a D&D employee, we've taken immediate action to suspend all contracts with Dalian, and I can confirm for this House that all active contracts with Dalian have been suspended. I can also confirm to this House that the member in question has also been suspended. The matter will be thoroughly investigated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, once again, I'm going to ask colleagues to please be respectful of the questions that are asked and, of course, of the answer given for many reasons. One of them, of course, is that members who require the use of translation can't hear through their earphones if members are shouting in terms of the response. Then I have
the Honourable Member for Burnaby South. A 6-person family and a pregnant woman live under a highway in Montreal. They were kicked out of their apartment. They cannot find affordable housing. This is the result of the Liberals and the Conservatives who have lost more than a million units of affordable housing. Will the Liberals, or are they ashamed of their track record, or are they too disconnected from reality? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that every person in Canada has a right to a home. It is a fundamental right. We doubled funding for communities to fight against homelessness and to make sure everyone has a roof over their heads. Mr. Speaker, we know there's a lot of work to be done, but unlike the Conservatives, it's not through bickering with municipalities that will get there. We need to sit down with everyone and find a lasting solution to homelessness in Canada. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Selkirk Interlache Eastman.
This Prime Minister isn't worth the cost the crime, the corruption, or the cover-ups. After hiding the Winnipeg lab documents from Canadians for over 3 years, we finally know why the Liberals blocked Parliament. We know that Dr. Chu had close and clandestine relationships with entities of the People's Republic